Welcome back to the Power 2 here on College Football Addiction. I just lost Tom. I don't know what just happened there, but either way, we're going to get going. We made it. It's game week. Again, it's Tom. Do you still see Tom on yours?
Nope. I see a bubble.
I'm still here somehow. There we go.
Dude, he just was like, "Oh, football's back." Well, Tom's not. So
this is what I get for broadcasting from the woods in Maine. So
this is what I get for going to Maine. Let's just start off there.
I love it. I'm in the woods. It's remote. There's hardly any Wi-Fi, but I love the Power 2. I'm here.
I'm glad that you are, buddy, but you're in Maine. That seems like a place where serial killers go. Am I going to have to watch on the news at this point?
I mean, Stephen King did get a lot of stuff from here. He's from here, so there's some fair points to that. I hear you.
How long are you up there for?
Here through Friday. Yeah, my family's vacationed here since before I was born, so come back here every single summer.
Now I feel like an asshole calling him a serial killer.
Oh, you are an asshole.
Which we will find out in just a moment. How much? Okay, before we get into this, week 0, finally here. The slate, not terrible. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Iowa State, Kansas State starts us off, and then there's more action. Hawaii plays Stanford late. Kansas plays, so you can see Jalen Daniels. Like, it's not kill yourself to see the entire slate, but it's decent for a week 0. That said, what is your plan for week 0, boys? Like, how are you watching everything? Are you watching the first one and let it, like Tom, you said you're traveling, but you'll be back Saturday. Do you have work stuff, or like how much will you two get to enjoy of this weekend?
I'm definitely going to pay attention to Farmageddon in Ireland. I studied abroad in Ireland when I was in college. I am Irish by descent, so I'm always curious when any sort of football goes down there. And I think that game is just going to be competitive, period. I think we should get a good game off the bat, considering last year was, mildly disappointing. I can't remember the combatants.
It was a good game. I'll say it was a good game. My wife. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I know. It was an interesting game. But I mean, it's such a cool thing for the fans to get to go over there, and the people from Ames, Iowa and Manhattan, Kansas have probably never seen an international airport in their lives. So they're having the chance to go over an ocean, and golly, look at all the green here. This is going to be great. No, I'm really excited about that. I'm the junkie, psycho who's going to watch Stanford versus Hawaii. But I think the thing I'm most jacked up about is that it has been confirmed by BYU football. Bear Bachmeier is their starting quarterback. He will wear number 47 this year.
That's amazing.
I want more insane, non-traditional quarterback numbers going forward. If we're going to have the number 0 at play, slap it on the biggest defensive tackle that you possibly have. I think that's a requirement for the number 0. And if we're going to have quarterbacks like Devin Brown at Ohio State wore 33, now he's at Cal wearing, I think he's wearing 13, but I'm like, stick with it. 47 is an insane quarterback number. And if he balls out, it's going to be so much more fun to watch. So I'm stoked. I've been dying for this.
I'd love the 00 on some stuff, and then I'll get calls it. 00 would be great. On Dublin, you mentioned like, but it was a good game. Like if you were a neutral, like last second field goal, back and forth, whatever, we're leaving the stadium, and my wife knows I'm upset, but she goes, well, at least it was a good game that went down the last seconds. And I was just like, find your own Uber. Like, just get your own Uber.
All the leprechauns, they'll drive you home.
Yeah, like go with the Georgia Tech folks, right? Like, my daughter, we're taking my daughter to a water resort, like a resort with a bunch of slides here in Orlando and stuff. And so I was telling my wife, I was like, yeah, I know you want to do all that, but like 11 o'clock to 2, like, can we do an early nap? Can we do a late lunch? Like, can we do something? And she's like, are you trying to watch a game? And I was like, it's work, babe. Like, I don't know what to tell you here. My channel's existence relies on Farmageddon. So Cole, what are you doing this weekend?
Look, I have made it abundantly clear. I am up at 6 a.m. I'm taking my dogs for a walk. I'm going to go to the gym. I am going to get a slew of coffee that is going to be caffeinated, coursing through my veins. And you want to talk about Tom being a sicko? Tom didn't even mention the best game of the day, which is going to be Tarleton State versus Portland State. Mercer plays at a neutral field at Alabama. And you want to know what? I got my ESPN Plus app just for those 2 games alone. We have ourselves college football on our screens. We got Hawaii. We got Western Kentucky breaking in a brand new quarterback with McIver. You got Sam Houston, which is my wife's college. Guess what? They're bringing in a brand new quarterback, and they're bringing in a brand new coach in Phil Lungo. It's Conference USA, Fresno versus Kansas at Kansas's home stadium, a stadium that they get to break on in. Like, I'm sorry, you can call it week 0 if you want. I call it the start of the college football season. I am so pumped. It's so sad that Farmageddon's not going to be played out in the middle of a snow matchup. But you know what? If I get to go ahead and bitch about that, I get to welcome myself in with all these other great matchups. I'm not moving off my couch starting at 10:45.
Yeah, I won't get to catch everything because we're, after Farmageddon, I'll take it. But then we've got stuff late and, but I will follow it on my phone and see if I can, those people that put like the phone in the waterproof thing or whatever. So we'll see. We'll see how much I can follow after Farmageddon, but I will watch that. All right, let's get started with a rant. Cole, you know what? I won't even intro this. Cole, take us away.
Look, I'm sorry. Okay. There have been a lot of things that have gone on in my life this week that I can just tell you, it's not been fun. This has not been things that like I've wanted to enjoy or having to defend. And I really don't want to defend the SEC because if as the SEC homer on the channel, I'm supposed to quote unquote support my conference because that's what people like to say, like TJ Pittinger and Danny Cannell, that we all come together and just support the SEC, even though half the SEC teams just kind of ride the coattails of Alabama, LSU, and Georgia for the last decade. This is not my Alabama fandom coming out either. This is just me being completely honest. Auburn, what the hell are you doing? Auburn, what the hell are you doing? So yesterday it was announced that Auburn is recognizing 7 other unclaimed national titles. And it goes from 1910 all the way to 2003. 2004. And we heard Tommy Tuberville come out and say, congratulations to the 2004 Auburn Tigers for winning the national championship. I know that our team was good enough to win the national title this year. And then you talk about some other teams from the 1930s and some teams from the 1950s. And I understand people got to realize that before the BCS era, they just had games to where they were voted on. They were unclaimed national titles. Alabama has multiple unclaimed national titles. They didn't play a game to go ahead and secure the victory. They just claimed it. And so we talk about Auburn doing the exact same thing. We've seen Michigan do this. We've seen Ohio State do that. Like, multiple teams have unclaimed national titles and they share the absolute title with another team. But we're in 2025, people. What the hell are you doing trying to call back to the day of when it was like, oh, our team being good? On top of already making this all about you deciding to finally retire Cam Newton's number, then you throw in the unclaimed national titles. You know what this feels like at this point? You're doing everything to avoid what is currently going on at Auburn.
Yeah.
This is going to be a lost season. So here, instead of looking this way, it's like you're distracting a child when you're trying to go ahead and get them to take a photo like a toddler. Hey, look this way. Hey, 7 unclaimed national titles. Hey, remember Cam? Remember when he had number 2? Retire his number, build him the statue. We're doing all those things. And you're doing it to take the pressure off of what actually is this season. And you know what the bottom line is? I understand that we're sitting here and we're complaining about Auburn doing this. I'd complain about any school doing this. Because you want to know why I'm complaining about this? The team that Auburn lost to in 2017, the UCF Knights, decided to claim a national title after beating them in the Peach Bowl and going undefeated. They celebrated at Disney World. They had a parade. They watched as everybody said, we were the champs. We deserved our spot in the playoff. And we eviscerated them. We clearly made fun of them, relentlessly bullied them into finally saying, you know what, we're not going to actually claim that anymore, to where they had to make the change. I'm going to do the same thing with Auburn. Auburn, this is dumb. This is dopey. This is ridiculously stupid. And the reason why, it has nothing to do with the fact that maybe your teams were good enough. It has everything to do with the fact that in 2025, we're not just giving out participation trophies. The reason why we don't complain about it with Alabama is because Alabama did this back in the day when it was fine to do it. Yep. Now it's because of it's 2025, and you're trying to find a reason to sell the identity of the program when you know this is a prove-it year, when you know this is so much more at stake, and then all the other comments have been going on off the field, whether it be the 3 different personnel members calling offensive plays, whether it be the Hugh Freeze saying, and I know what he meant by it, but still, it's just a bad look for a headline. All 3 quarterbacks may play. I get it. It's because if you have certain design plays for Daniels and you have certain design plays for Deuce Knight, but Jackson Arnold's going to be your QB1. It doesn't help when we hear reports coming out that Jackson Arnold isn't struggling. So, like, you're taking all of these things that are so negative and trying to put a positive spin on it. It doesn't work. You're living in the past. You really are truly, kid you not, living in the past by going and claiming these unclaimed national titles. And by the way, Tommy Tuberville, After deciding to ruin a program like Texas Tech and Cincinnati and is currently trying to find his best way of ruining the United States government, you coming out here and saying that Auburn deserved to win the national title when there clearly was a game that was played between two teams that did play and won the national title is also ridiculous. You know who doesn't claim the national title? The team that lost in the national title. They don't. So I'm sorry, Auburn. If you really want people to start believing in you once again and thinking that the program is in a good state of mind, don't do dumb things like this. Sincerely. It's nonsensical, and more importantly, it is just a bad look on your face. Nobody is going to claim it. Nobody's going to celebrate you. Nobody is going to honor it. We're all just going to go ahead and point and laugh and continuously make fun of people who believe that the Auburn Tigers actually have 11 national titles attached to their name.
Yeah, you mentioned UCF, and I thought that was your best. I mean, that was a 10 out of 10 rant that we've gotten from Cole. Maybe one of the best. You can tell it's game week. Listen, we all gave UCF so much crap when they did it, but at least they did it that year. Could you imagine if UCF did it, like say Scott Frost did them go 4-8 this year, right? Which look at their Vegas win total, right? It's not too far off from that. Say they have a terrible year with Scott Frost coming home, kind of what they're pinning all their hopes and dreams on. And then they do this for 2017, like next year, right? Going into the 2026 season. That's what it's like to me. UCF at least did it in the moment. And at least did it like while it was happening. And it was corny then. They've retracted. Like, yes, all those things. But I think this is so much worse. Like going back to the early 1900s to try and score a win. You know, I'll tell you this. Florida State didn't play football from 1906 until 1946. We should claim those 40. We didn't lose one game for 40 years. Now, we didn't have a program, but give me 40 more titles. We are ahead of everyone at this point. And so, yeah, it is so hilarious, and it reeks of. I don't think the Cam Newton thing in and of itself is that big of a deal. Like you hear a lot of that stuff like right before a season starts, they'll do stuff like this.
Deserved of all the number twos to be retired in college football this year. Well, this one actually makes sense.
I'd put Shedeur maybe slightly ahead, but
oh my God,
Cam Newton lost less games at Auburn than Shedeur did in 1 year. So. Then the Cam thing is fine in and of itself, but to do this right before a season start, I mean, this is a February move. If you're really going to do this, I mean, which you shouldn't anyway.
Well, that's the thing. You just shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's like speeding it through a school zone on the first day of school, right? Like you want to speed through a school zone like in May, like, all right, man, like do your worst. Everyone's looking at Auburn like, dude, are y'all going to be for real this year? Are you going to be legit, or is Vandy going to beat you again? Right? Is Pavia going 5-0? Like,
What it says to me is that it's far worse of a situation at Auburn than we realized, and that it's not just a Hugh Freeze coaching staff issue. This is an athletic department issue because one does not make the decision without the other, and this is a complete lack of self-awareness by the Auburn athletic department to even allow this to be a thought that makes it out.
Oh no.
Oh my goodness.
The main Wi-Fi.
And it was going to be such a good quote. I was so excited.
Yeah, I'm not moving on. I want to know what he says.
I refuse to move on until he's back. I refuse. Yeah. Okay. I saw this stat today, or I heard this stat, and I want to give credit where credit's due. Brooks Austin called it out. I think it was the 1910 season for Auburn. Auburn had a worse record than Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt could claim a national title, and Vanderbilt, the program that has been the laughingstock, dumping doormat of the SEC for over 5 decades, is still beyond willing to say, you know what? Yeah, we're going to hold out hope. You know what? We know that it's wrong. We know this is not right.
I watched Brooks talked about how crazy it was in that clip, but then he talked about how this is just goofy, right? And, you mentioned dopey and he mentioned goofy and, not to give UCF a hard time with all the Disney puns, but yeah, it's a
Mickey Mouse championship for you.
It is rather hilarious to hear this. Now, if Auburn would have been beating this drum for 20 years, right, from 2004 until now, I think you'd say, listen, that's their take and that's fine. But to do it today, 20 years later, posthumous of the death of their program, is funny to me. Tom, I think you're just a black screen right now. You may have to jump out and jump back in if you can hear me. I'll shoot him a text. Man, I really don't want to move on.
I was so excited to hear what he had to say. I was so excited.
It's never mind. I'm not going to make that joke, but I want to ask you this until Tom gets back in fully. How much when covering the SEC? I really just wanted to know this. I meant to ask you a couple of days ago when we were just talking about other stuff off air. How much, like, does your Alabama, do you have any Alabama pride? Like, or do you just try and suppress it? Do you try and be unbiased? Are there times where you let it shine through? Like, what's your motto on that? While we're on Auburn, let's give them another reason to hate you.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? No, I mean, the bottom line for me is that I've always, because of my journalism background, like actually being in the journalism department and learning how to be an unbiased reporter, I've always had that mentality. Like, I remember when I joined the Crimson White in 2013, it was very clear that, like, hey, hope your fandom was fun, because now that's over. Now you got to just be a unbiased reporter. And certainly there are times that I will weigh in my decision of Alabama versus insert team here. I believe that they're just better on paper, but I never let it completely control what is the narrative of the game. Like, I thought last season, Alabama, despite having wins over Georgia and wins over LSU, they were the least deserving team of the three that were in the race for the 9-3 season to go to the college football playoff. They would have gotten in because they have the head-to-head win over South Carolina, but I said on multiple occasions, South Carolina played better football last season than Alabama. Ole Miss didn't play Alabama, and they have a win against South Carolina, and they also have a couple of games that were really much in their favor. So it's hard for me to doubt them. So I don't allow it to affect the way that I feel. What I will say is that with Alabama being the standard, Alabama doing something like this in 2025 would have definitely been ridiculed, and fans wouldn't have expected this. Fans right now want to freaking fire Kalen DeBoer after one season of missing the playoff for losing to Vanderbilt. And remember, this is a guy that's coming on in and replacing the greatest coach of all time. That's going to be challenging to say the least.
Yeah, I'll say this too. I know you didn't ask. I try and do the same thing with FSU, but I do make it very well known that I like them and I'm pulling for them on stuff. But I'm not even really more from the journalistic standpoint, just more like my own integrity. Like I don't know, just trying to call it like you see it, right? And I think you can have. I do think that's kind of where we're in this, not weird, but just this different landscape of what media and content is, to where I never went down the journalist route. So that part hasn't been like beaten out of me. And I think it's fine to still say like, look, I'm a fan of this, but I'm not so much a fan that I'm going to sugarcoat when they do things that are idiotic, or I'm going to try and hype up something that's not good or whatever. I do think that my bias comes out more often than maybe yours does or anything else like that.
Welcome
but
back.
I think just trying to like kind of stay true to like, I don't know who you are. Not that there's anything wrong with having biases. Some of the best people that I follow, I put a thread out on Twitter today of there are a ton of massive homers in there for their team. I don't have a problem with that. Like, great, be a homer. But I do think we're kind of in this space now that it allows that so much more than like 15 years ago, right? Where 15 years ago, you had to just be so black and white and boring, and you could never say the word we or anything like that, or they just lynch you at that point. So anyway, Tom, you had a point on Auburn that we've been killing time for 3 minutes on now.
Back now, is my audio working? Is everything?
Hi, welcome. You sound delightful.
Thank God. Okay, great. Thank you. So, I don't know. Just overall, to me, this feels like Miami football circa 5 years ago, where it was like, hey, what in the world are they doing? It just felt wildly disorganized, and it wasn't just a football problem. It was an athletic department problem. I think on top of Hugh Freeze being on the hot seat in terms of wins and losses, some of the insane quotes that he puts out there in terms of length and girth and such. And then the questions about his quarterback. You guys know how I feel about even hiring DJ Durkin in the sport. On top of, okay, they have to win this year, and they have all these talented recruits and all these solid players that they think they can make a run with. And you put this out there, and you're just adding to the pile of bad PR. And you would think at some point an adult would step in and say, we're going to stop the bleeding. We have to repair and maintain and improve the image of Auburn football. And here's the thing. If Hugh Freeze gets ousted by the end of this year, somebody else of high profile ilk is going to take this job because there's a ton of money that goes along with it. But I don't know if that person's going to be set up for success. That's the tragedy, I'll use that word, about Auburn football, because this is a great program. This is a program that has won a national championship, has had a Heisman Trophy winner, all those sorts of things. It is a storied program. So you want to see it succeed. It's for the betterment of the conference and of the sport. But right now, it just feels like this is a athletic department problem, not just a football problem. And that's worse.
Let's go to week 0. and talk a little Farmageddon. And then if you guys want to talk anything in any of the other games, we can, but I think we'll spend most of our time here. But Iowa State, Kansas State. Cole, I'll start with you. This is one of the most underrated quarterback matchups across the entire country any week. Like Rocco Becht, Avery Johnson, I am ecstatic to see this. Now the Big 12 has a ton of good quarterback play, and there will be, Avery versus your boy Sawyer, and there's a lot, there's a lot of good stuff in here, right? So, but I don't know I think people don't treat week 0 with the respect that they should.
They don't.
And I don't think, this is an in-conference matchup of two of the top teams in the Big 12 that have odds to go to the Big 12 championship and thus the playoff. And you've got a lot of time to recover, right? So nobody's sinking their season because of what happens, in 3 days. But this matchup is severely underrated to me. I think this is a bigger matchup. Now, we all saw how the result played out. This is a more exciting matchup than even last year's was, because people were, Georgia Tech might turn it around, but not a lot of people had expectations out of this. It's more exciting than next year's with TCU and UNC, unless, we get more Belichick fireworks or TCU really surprises. So I don't know. I think this matchup is phenomenal. I want to get your thoughts.
I hate that it's Farmageddon being played in Ireland, because there's just something about it being in Ames and Manhattan that makes more sense, especially at the end of the year with what you brought up, Big 12 potential, Big 12 potential championship hopes on the line. It adds more volume to this game, but yeah, these are two teams that if you told me at the end of the season we're beginning college football this year and ending college football this year in the Big 12 for a shot at going to the college football playoff, it wouldn't shock me. We talk about Iowa State. Iowa State has Rocco Becht back, and it's going to be really intriguing to see what he does now without his two NFL wide receivers. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are playing here in Houston, and that was a big reason why they had their first 11-win season. But then on the flip side, the other part is they have everyone else returning. You look at their roster, they have the most returning starters on offense in college football this year. All 5 starting offensive linemen are back. You also still have not just Rocco Becht, you have your star tight end in Gabe Burke. You still have Abu Sama back. You have Carson Hansen back. So it's an offense that really isn't missing a beat. And defensively, they have, I believe if I'm not mistaken, they have 5 starters back, including Cale Berenza and Cooper Ebel. So there's a lot to like about where this overall identity is for Iowa State that some people are kind of selling simply because they lost the 2 1,000-yard receivers. Flipping over to Kansas State. In my opinion, Kansas State, with Avery Johnson specifically, Avery Johnson got the Nico Iamaleava treatment in the Big 12, where we watched as Will Howard left the program, and part of the reason he left was because he knew he wasn't starting over a guy that has been waiting in the wings. So we hyped him up to be the next second coming of Colin Klein, to be this overall impactful leader that was going to transcend Wildcat football. And he had a good year for a first-time starter. He had a very good year for a first-time starter. But the expectations never met the potential. So we kind of now are underselling him going into this year. I don't think that's fair. I think that he is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12, if not a top 15 passer in college football. I think another season working with Matt Wells is going to be really beneficial for his numbers. 6 returning starters come to this team, including Dylan Edwards at your running back spot. J.C. Brown is going to be your number 1 wide receiver. You still have Garrett Oakley. You still have Sam Hedge. You still have Taylor Poity. And you have, in my opinion, the most underappreciated coach in Chris Kleiman in college football calling the shots. The way I view Kansas State overall is they are the Texas A&M of the Big 12. And that's not to be insulting. What it means is they're a surefire bet every single season to at least get 8 wins. And I think that that's kind of where we are with them at this point, is that there's going to be some years that they end up over-exceeding, take their team to Arlington and maybe win a conference title. And there's going to be some years that they finish 7-5, but most of the time, great defensive play, exceptional running game, the ability to have a quarterback that can at least keep you involved in every single game. An underrated player, for my money, it's the freshman tight end that they have, which, again, they landed a 5-star freshman tight end. He is, I think, going to have to be an X factor from the get-go. And they also have stability when it comes to the offensive personnel. It's one of those things to where I just have this trust factor with Kansas State every single season. I know what they're going to be. I can understand where there's going to be some hiccups, but I like this team. Going into this matchup, one thing I'm going to be looking at is who runs the football better. You have Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards. You have Carson Hansen. You have Abu Sama. Can one of these two duos really kind of take over the game, especially and set up your offense to where it can be dynamic on second and third down? it really does set the tone. It helps you win the time of possession. That's going to be really beneficial. But these are two quarterbacks that I have a lot of faith in. These are two teams that I think have a lot of upside. And again, they have two coaches that we respect very highly in this game. I think it's going to be a matchup, like you said, TJ, that a few years from now, when we look at the other games that are played internationally, this will be the standard. This will be the one that we continuously look back on and say, there's a reason why this game had so much validity to it and why we actually understand more international progress coming towards this sport.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you. I hate it for the Kansas State fans, and I also love it, and the Iowa State fans. I also love it for them to be able to go experience it. There is something that's I don't love the concept of taking college football games away from home campuses. I am diabolically opposed to that. Shoot, I don't even, Florida fans will get pissed at this, but I don't even like the cocktail party in Jacksonville. Like, I wish it would rotate, like play it in Jacksonville 2 years and then go home and away the other two, or something like, put it on a 4-year rotation. But that said, if you're going to play it, if you're going to play games at a neutral site in another country, put something good on the put a good product. Like this West Michigan thing that's happening in Germany. We couldn't get something a little better than that. Like we couldn't do Michigan versus, Minnesota, like something at least Big Ten. And I get both sides. So I do get that side. I do understand both sides. But yeah, this matchup is severely underrated to me. And you're right. Like it will probably be one of the better ones that we get there for quite a while. We'll see, in a couple of months what the announcement is for the next one and who the next couple of teams will be in 2027. But it's hard for me to imagine that it gets much better than this one. I don't know that you're ever going to see much outside of, unless it's Notre Dame, much outside of the ACC or Big 12 out there. But man, I'd like I'd love to see a massive matchup out there, and maybe even find myself going out to another one day. I want to ask Avery Johnson real quick, and then we'll move on. But underperformed somewhat last year. How big of a step do you think if you have to predict it now and call your shot, how big of a step does he take this year? Maybe where's he finish I'm not necessarily looking for a stat line, but where's he finish ranked among Big 12 quarterbacks if you have to call it right now?
Tom, you want to take this or you want me to? Top 6. I think in every category. I think top 6 is fine. When I look at the quarterback position, I got my top 2. It's Sam Levitt and Sawyer Robertson. I don't think that's changing anytime soon, largely due to the supporting cast around them. But then you have to wonder who is going to be that breakout guy. Will it be Devin Dampier at Utah? He has his offensive coordinator Beck following him to New Mexico. His number 1 wide receiver followed him to New Mexico. Is that going to translate from Group of 5 play to Big 12 play? What are we going to get from Brendan Sorby out in Cincinnati? He's another starter that's returning. What are we going to get from Rocco Beck? You bring in Chase Soule, the ECU wide receiver, but do you feel like that you have a secondary option? And I think you also have to throw in the element of what is the dual threat mentality that Avery Johnson plays with. The thing that you have to prepare for is not just his arm, that I think is good. It's not elite, but it's good. But you also have to throw in his legs. Is he going to keep drives alive on the ground? Is he going to continue to convert? Are there going to be run design plays that allow him to maybe finish second in the Big 12 among quarterbacks in rushing yards? Is he going to lead Kansas State in rushing this year? Like, that's the thing that I look at. But I do think you will see growth. I think that J.C. Brown is kind of sleeping as a wide receiver. I could see him and Josh Hoover fighting for that QB3 spot at the season's end. It's for different reasons, but definitely reasons that you believe in.
Let's move on. Oh, let's predict this real quick. Actually, no, let's not. Let's save that.
Why? I guess I know why.
I ruined it. Let's go to the SEC real quick. We're doing quick previews on 4 teams because we've run out of time, essentially, and wanted to get a few more teams in here before we get out of it. We didn't do all 16 teams, but I'd say we did more than half of everybody because we started earlier in the year with some of them. Let's start with South Carolina, Cole. It's been the Cole show today. Sorry, Tom.
All right, so South Carolina, they went 9-3 last season. They were the hottest team to close out 2024 in the SEC. They felt like that they belonged in the college football playoff, and I'll be completely real. TJ, Tom, that interception by Nicky Minwori should have counted against LSU. They should have been 10-2. They should have been in the playoff. They had every right to complain about officiating in the SEC last season. But then they lose to Illinois, and it kind of negates the argument altogether. We had the big fight between Bielema and Beamer, which is awesome. More down the sidelines in bowl games. Go ahead and invoke the animosity. I love that stuff. It's great for the sport. But now it's time to rebuild. This is not a rebuilding year. It certainly feels like a retooling year. Yeah, the most important piece figured out, quarterback. Lenore Sellers, you talk to people down in Columbia, they think he's the best quarterback in college football. You ask me, I could see a scenario where he is the best quarterback in college football. He is going to have to carry his team 10 times out of 10. But they also do feel good about the offensive line. They do feel good about what they have at wide receiver. They didn't go out in the portal and bring in anybody the way that Penn State did. And honestly, that was a big time selling point for me to believe if we see one wide receiver make that jump over to South Carolina, I think that we are talking about them as a college football playoff threat, not a dark horse, an actual threat, but they believe in the young players, whether it be Alex Cyrus or whether it be Sellers' little brother, or whether it be a Malik Clark. You bring back Nick Harbor, you bring back Mazeo Bennett, you still have Jared Brown on the roster. The running back room is going to be really the kind of selling point. We're less than 10 days away from kickoff in Atlanta. This is a Sunday morning game. Is Rasul Faison going to be playing for them? Because if Rasul Faison is playing for them, you have, I think, a stable running back and a good complementary piece to pair alongside with a quarterback that needs a good running back. If not, is it Oscar Attaway? Is it Jawan Howell? Who is going to be that lead back that you trust to kind of take some pressure off of Lenore Sellers? Reports coming out of Columbia right now, they really like what they have seen from his progression as a passer. And largely that has to do with everything that Mike Shula has implemented. So Dow Logan's kind of brought the best version of Lenore Sellers on the ground out. Now you're seeing the best version of the passing coming out with Mike Shula, who was an offensive analyst last season for the Gamecocks, that's now taking over and calling plays. Offensive line feels really good. The defense is going to be the selling point. The defense last year carried them to wins in multiple games where the offense was stale. It was anemic. It wasn't able to find any life because of it gave second chance opportunities. You had the SEC Defensive Player of the Year in Kyle Kennard. You had a freshman phenom in Dylan Stewart that was kind of figuring out what his role was going to be. You had good depth on the defensive line with Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. You had good linebacker play with Debo Williams, Nikki Manwari in the back end of the secondary, 2 veteran cornerbacks. And all of that is now off to the Sunday game. It was so good that we watched them transition and prove to the NFL people we're good enough to continue our playing careers. So what do? You had a back portal in a lot of pieces. You still have Clayton White as your signal caller, which is a good thing because I think that Clayton White is one of the more underappreciated running defense coordinators in the sport. But you had to bring in a lot of new talent. Gabriel Brown-Landindy comes on in from Texas A&M. You bring in the Florida State linebacker. You bring in Justin Okoronkwo from Alabama. You still have Jelon Kilgore in the nickel position, but you also brought in Brandon Cisse from NC State. You brought in a couple of new safety positions. So it's a lot of new. What's going to be interesting is that you start off the season with Virginia Tech, but you got a couple of close games afterwards. You got to go travel to Missouri. You got to go down to Death Valley to face off against LSU. How quickly can this defense all come together and kind of gel as one cohesive unit? Not a bunch of transfers, not a bunch of guys that were waiting in the wings. They all play one certain balance. Because if they do that, I mean, it may not be a top 20 defense like it was last season, but you'll take a top 40 defense if your passing attack improves. You'll take a top 40 defense if you're able to be more efficient in the red zone with the passing game and with the third down conversions. You'll take that as long as it flips. The X factor player is naturally Lenore Sellers, but I think that Nick Harbor is going to have to step on up as wide receiver 1. Remember, you watch the highlights of him. Like when we were talking about him coming out of high school, they weren't focusing in on his football stats. They were looking at his track stats, what he was doing as a potential Olympic runner. And now he's had the entire offseason to not worry about track and field. He's actually played in the spring and fall camp. He's built a rapport with Lenore Sellers. I think he has to live up to those expectations. We talk about that speed. We talk about that physicality. We talk about that potential of what he can be as a vertical threat. If he ends up hitting his stride at the right time, it takes a lot of pressure off of Mazeo Bennett. Takes a lot of pressure off of Jordan Dingle, the new tight end coming on in from Kentucky. Takes a lot of pressure off of one of the freshmen, or Jared Brown if he's the slot receiver. He's got to be the X factor, I think, for this team to kind of take the flight. I think their overall potential is a 10-2 season. I could see them easily holding their own. The game against Clemson's at home at Willie B. They get to welcome in Alabama for homecoming. They get to welcome in Oklahoma right after playing at LSU. And Oklahoma's going to be coming off at the Red River Shootout. There's a lot of good matchups where Willie B., which is, in my opinion, the most underappreciated college football stadium in the history of the sport, is going to have moments to shine. They are going to have to play some tough road games. They are traveling down to Oxford. They are traveling over to Columbia, Missouri. They are playing in a neutral site game against Virginia Tech that may end up being the tone setter. But I look at this team and I think that their ceiling is 10-2. Their floor is 6-6. You have a quarterback in Lenore Sellers that is going to have to lead you game by game into victory. But you have a quarterback in Lenore Sellers. That should at least get you to bowl eligibility. What I wonder about this team most of all, and what's going to decide the season is how quickly can everyone gel together and how quickly can they put last season behind them? Because if last season is last season, yeah, you can feel like that you were snubbed. You can feel like that you weren't able to sustain anything. You can feel like that your team definitely deserved a spot in the playoff, but nobody wants to hear about it. You have to focus in on the here and now. This is a team that has talent. This is a team that has playmakers. This is a team that I do believe is going to hold its own in every single matchup. But you got to believe that last season wasn't a fluke. Last season wasn't your one and done, and now you're being punished by not going to the playoff this year. You have to have the same mentality you had after playing good against LSU for the rest of this year. And if you do that, South Carolina's going to be a threat. I think they're a 9-3 team at the end of the season.
I like the way they bounced back from the LSU game where I agree with you completely. They got jobbed and absolutely should have won that game. Maybe they can just claim it like Auburn did a couple of titles here this week. That LSU game is the one I'm looking at. I mean, you mentioned Virginia Tech. They got to go to Missouri. Obviously, Pavia comes to town too. I would say it's more likely than not that they start out 5-0. Right? I can't guarantee that. Certainly, they could trip up any one of those 3 games that I just mentioned. But I like them to start 5-0. And if they go 5-0 to LSU having already played at Clemson and against DJ Lagway in Florida, what's LSU's record at that point, right? Do they split those 2 games? Do they have a couple of wins? Shoot, could you imagine if they had 2 losses and 5-0 South Carolina was coming in? Either way, going to Baton Rouge there with last year, again, you talked about forgetting last year. Listen, they may forget the year, but they ain't going to forget what happened in that game. Going into that game at potentially 5-0 in Death Valley, probably a night game when it is all said and done. That is the game on the schedule. Now, there's a lot of other fun stuff too. Alabama, Ole Miss, Clemson at the end of the year. But that's the one I think you win that one and you start out 6-0, man, but buckle up because you're talking about a top 3 or 4 team at that point. Let's bounce back and forth on this just because I miss hearing Tom's.
I miss hearing Tom's voice. I need a breather.
Let me give Cole a chance to drink some coffee or water or something. Well, it's game week. It could be something even stronger in there. Tom, let's talk about Michigan for a minute.
I have to work.
There's so many questions surrounding what Michigan is actually going to look like this season. I think so much of it begins with Bryce Underwood, the star freshman quarterback. Is he going to be the guy? I don't know at this point in time if Michigan has established a starter. If they have during this time, feel free to correct me. But you've got Mikey Keene, the veteran transfer from Fresno State. So that's something that Michigan has liked to do in the past. Meanwhile, you have Sharon Moore at a head coach who's going to be in a situation where he's missing weeks 3 and 4, and then another game that he's going to have to miss due to the recent NCAA sanctions. Postseason, $20 million fine coming up this season and next season. So Michigan's just dealing with a lot this year. Here's the reason I think for positivity in general for Michigan. The team that they fielded and dog walked Alabama's ones in a bowl game last year should encourage Wolverine fans. Now, are they going to do anything earth-shattering this year? No, I expect them to be hovering around 8 and 4, but defensively, Wink Martindale, a defensive coordinator, I like the continuity there, and I like the pieces that they put on the field last year. Again, that Alabama game was mostly Michigan's 2s and 3s, especially on defense. So seeing Rayshawn Benny, Trey Williams, Trey Pierce, Derek Moore, Jayshawn Barham, I love his game. He is one of the next great linebackers in the history of Michigan football. Ernest Hausman, TJ Guy. I mean, there's so much talent on that front 7, front 8, whatever you want to call it, for Michigan football. I'm very encouraged by what they can do on that front. And I think they're going to need to rely on their defense because the overarching question on the offense is, okay, if Bryce Underwood or Mikey Keene, whoever is the starter, well, who the hell are they throwing the ball to? Because there's nobody in this wide receiver core that should scare virtually anyone in the Big Ten, let alone nationally. There's going to be, that bottom third of the Big Ten that's not going to be able to keep up with some of these kids. But at the same time, it's going to be kind of old school Michigan football. Run the ball, work behind a very strong, big, physical, talented offensive line, and you know what you're going to get in Justice Haynes. I think that's a really nice addition out of the portal. I really like that one within the conference. But it is going to be a situation where I think it's going to look probably closer to what J.J. McCarthy was and what that offense felt like. Is, yes, you'd like it if you had a Roman Wilson, somebody like that, like just a security blanket, not a game breaker by any means. But I have been consistently impressed with what Michigan has done with the tight end position. So I feel like Michigan, if they lean on the running game, as always, if you're going to be more quarterback run focused with Bryce Underwood, that's going to at least give you some options, some misdirection, and change of pace within the offense. So I think that's encouraging. But Michigan, I don't know, this is just going to be a challenging year. But even at the same time, I look at their schedule and it's not something that's it's relatively favorable in the grand scheme of things. And you do have Washington there at home in the middle of October. You're going to have, of course, Ohio State at the end of the year. There's a lot of winnable games on the schedule. But again, this is a team that we're really not going to understand until the middle of October, and that Washington game will be a great barometer. So I have positive feelings surrounding this Michigan team. I don't think they make the playoff. I think they'll make a decent bowl game, but it's just a myriad of question marks for the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, I just talked and I was on mute the whole time.
You were on mute the entire time.
I was going to say, what happened to me?
Does Tom not want to talk to me? Like, I just asked a
I love you, man. What were you saying? Sorry.
I asked a very straightforward yes or no question, and Tom just like was staring at me, and I was like,
I got nothing. Yeah.
Come on, dog. Like, give me an answer.
What was your
Do
question?
they beat Ohio State to finish the year? That's really the only thing I want to know at this point.
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
Do they beat Ohio State to finish the year? I guess that's the big question on my mind with Michigan.
No, and I just saw Ohio State named Julian Sayin the starting quarterback, and he's going to have trial by fire against Texas. And honestly, no matter who they started, if it was Lincoln Keenholz, it would have been the same situation. That's brutal. At least you get a home game. I think by the end of the year, Ohio State knows exactly who they are, and they have more ability. I like their depth more than I like Michigan's in this situation. And I think, or at least I hope, Ryan Day learned his lesson from last year. And frankly, offensively, there are less reasons to believe that Ohio State could be the team that goes out and is more physical than you and runs the football than there were last year. And Ryan Day made that mistake with Chip Kelly. And now it's Brian Hartline, which you expected to be more of a pass-happy offense. Julian Sayin, that slew of wide receivers, tight ends, Jeremiah Smith, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I like what Ohio State can be by the end of the year, and also probably having more to play for. But granted, they had that same situation last year. So I think going to Michigan will give Ohio State a little bit more motivation. I think this is a really pissed off fan base, and they still, even though they won the national title, they're like, okay, that was more of a consolation prize for some Buckeye fans than really anything, which is astonishing. So I think Ryan Day has to beat Michigan this year. Has to. I don't think he will get fired by any means if he doesn't beat Michigan, but he is still somehow public enemy number one in Columbus, and they won a national title.
I will ask real fast, what are realistic expectations for Bryce Underwood if he is the starter? Because, again, you have all the money that's coming on in from the boosters. You have all the NIL deals. You have a quarterback that was supposed to go to LSU until he flipped it at the last second.
Right.
But it's also a freshman playing in the Big Ten. He's got some tough road games. He has some very minuscule matchups that could end up really helping or hurting Michigan's case. So in your opinion, what's a winning season that gets the fans to buy into 2026?
To your point, at Oklahoma in September, at Nebraska, also back end of September, you host Wisconsin, which I know that's not really the scariest game for some people, but sometimes Wisconsin just drags you down into the trenches. At USC, hosting Washington, and Cole, I know you love Damon Williams and what they can do. And then you're going to end the year with a pretty favorable schedule with Michigan State, little brother, hosting Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland, and then Ohio State goes to Michigan. So there's a lot of favorable things there. I think, unfortunately, those road tests are going to be a problem for them. So again, I see this as an 8-4 team. I think 9-3 is the ceiling, and that really the losable games to me feel like Ohio State, Washington, and I'm going to say, honestly, it could be a toss-up with Oklahoma, Nebraska, or USC. Like any one of those three I could see going not in Michigan's favor. But for Bryce Underwood, you do have to kind of start small if you don't really have that much faith in your wide receivers to create separation, especially against some really good secondaries that exist within the Big Ten and especially in postseason play. So I think Bryce Underwood, if he's a guy who you limit him to 20 passes per game maximum, and you try and run him kind of like a Riley Leonard, almost like 10 to 15 carries a game, you're going to get better production out of your offense, and you're going to protect the deficiencies you potentially have in the passing game. I don't expect those deficiencies, by the way, to come from Bryce Underwood. or even from Mikey Keene. I think these guys can move the football through the air. It's just the guys catching it have to be able to get open and do something. And I just don't have a lot of confidence in that. So we'll see who they end up naming as the starter, and they'll have a little bit of time to figure it out, but not that much.
Michigan fans will be mad that you didn't say he was winning the Heisman. Back to A&M. Speaking of 8-4, we got 2 teams left, so we'll try and run through these quick. But A&M, Cole.
Yeah, Texas 8-4. It's a joke for a reason. They are the model of consistency.
Is it a joke?
It's a joke. It's a joke in the SEC for a reason, because it's the model of consistency. The model also says that you're an average team every single year. They have more 7-5, 8-4 seasons than they do 10-win seasons since joining the SEC in 2012. They have one 10-win season. They have a slew of 8-4, 7-5. So we want to see the culture change. Mike Elko, you're one. If you just told me that he went 8-4, not knowing what has been the constant carousel of mediocrity underneath that program, you call it a win. They had a 7-1 season going into the final month of November, but then proceeded to lose in 4 overtimes to Auburn. They never were able to find their footing in the second half against South Carolina, largely due to the fact that Le'Veon Moss got hurt, and they ended up losing to Texas. But they were in the race still to go to Atlanta and maybe be a sleeper for the college football playoff if they just win against Auburn or they just win against South Carolina. They enter that 9-3 conversation. A large part of it was the fact that, and you saw this especially in the USC game in the Las Vegas Bowl, their secondary just fell apart at times. They were unable to close out games. They were unable to play that physical brand of football that we saw when they traveled down to Gainesville, when they traveled to Mississippi State, when they took on LSU at home. They didn't have that same mentality. And largely, it wasn't just in the secondary, it was also in the pass rush. So Mike Elko spent the entire offseason making sure that every single nook and cranny on his side of the football, his bread and butter, his calling card that has made him one of the more sought-after defensive names in the sport, was well equipped. And so they're going to be better on that end. I think the other thing that you have to look at is this is going to be a veteran offense. Yes, Marcel Reed is a new starting quarterback in terms of he's had the entire offseason for the first time since arriving in College Station. He is QB1, even though he does have first-team reps underneath his belt, and he did lead the team after the LSU game all the way to the 8-4 finish. This is also this is an offensive line that returns 4 full-time starters, 5 difference makers who have starting reps underneath their belt that they're all interchanging. So much so that they're trying to figure out what is going to be the plan with Trey Zune because they know how good they feel about their tackle position. They upgrade at wide receiver, 2 of the biggest names and 2 of the biggest highlights so far of all of training camp, regardless of what program we're talking about. Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver. They have been the talk of all of football right now down in the southeastern region of Texas. They are really making strides with Marcel Reed as the QB1. You have a healthy running back room for the first time this season. Le'Veon Moss is back. He is not having to worry about dealing with non-contact. You have a Reuben Owens that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. You also have 2 really good backups in E.J. Smith and Amari Daniels that would start for multiple schools in the SEC. So you look at this overall unit and say, there is a lot to believe in with Texas A&M. But also, it's Texas 8-4, so I got to see it before I stop making the jokes. They're going to have an opportunity to really set the tone. I think that the big thing that I look for this Texas A&M team are 2 main elements. Number 1, can you win the games you're supposed to win? Can you wake up for the games that you're supposed to show up for? Because when you look at Texas A&M underneath Jimbo Fisher and even Kevin Sumlin at times, they would play up to the standard when they went up against Georgia or Alabama or LSU. They would show out for those matchups that had a ranked number attached to the name. It's the games when you go up against the unranked opponent. That's an early kick. It's an early kick, or it's a late night game and you just don't want to be there, that you think that you're in control for. You end up costing yourself. I can't tell you how many times they've lost to Mississippi State when they look like the better team. They nearly lost to Colorado in 2021. They took all the way down to the wire and a Zach Calzada rushing touchdown for them to get a win against a team that went 1-11. They lost to a group of 5 Appalachian State. But yet in the same year, they held their own against the University of Alabama that was number 1. So can you win the games that you're supposed to win while still showing up for the big time matchups? And number 2, that fight that we see early on in the season, the one that we're going to see on display when they travel to South Bend, Indiana, the one when they welcome in Auburn, the one when they welcome in Florida in early October. Will you still have that fight going into November? Will you still be able to show that physicality, that tenacity, that work ethic that was fully on display during the months of September and October down the stretch when you had to face off against South Carolina, when you have to go travel to Austin to take on Texas, when you have to go play on the road against Arkansas? Can you make sure that you put yourself in a position where, hey, everything that we worked for this offseason, it was on display week 1. It's also on display in week 11. It's also on display in week 12. We know that our schedule is going to have a few trials and tribulations, but it doesn't matter. We're showing you why things are changing. I'm a big believer in Mike Elko. I'm a big believer in this identity of the program. Two things that I think you're going to have to see. The X factor player for me overall, I think is going to have to be somebody on the defense. I go Torian York, the linebacker. He is going to have to be that general. He is going to have to be able to do a little bit of everything, whether it be blitzing, whether it be playing in coverage. He's got a good running mate with Scooby Williams, but I do wonder about what is going to be this pass rush outside of Cassius Howell. I'll tell you what, Torian York is a dude that you do not want to mess with. He's 5'11", but he plays like he's 6'3". He is not afraid to go toe-to-toe with anybody in the industry, especially when it comes to winning his one-on-one battles. He got a fight against an Auburn offensive lineman last season, so he will go to war for his team. That running back room, I think, is going to truly decide how good Texas A&M is. Because I like Casey Concepcion. I like Mario Craver. I do think that you can have the best running back room in college football. Like, you look top to bottom. Lavian Moss, Ruben Owens as a 1-2 complementary piece. Then you throw in the mobility of Marcel Reed. It's not going to shock me if they end up finding a way to lead the country in yards per game, total carries, rush attempts. And I get it. We got to talk a lot about what is the military academies, but A&M has the talent to go ahead and push. Key games to look for in this match, in this season. Number 1, South Bend, Indiana, week 3. You got CJ Carr coming off of a bye week to kind of mentally prepare after what happens in the Miami game. How do you respond? How do you show that physicality? This is going to be one of the better rushing tandems in college football. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love versus Lavian Moss and Ruben Owens. That's something that you have got to focus in on. The offensive line play is going to be the selling point of this matchup. Then you got to go look at some other games. The Florida game. TJ Lagway at one point was viewed as the potential quarterback long-term for Texas A&M. Now he gets to come back home. What is Florida going to be? They're coming off of playing Texas in that game. What about the Auburn game? Jackson Arnold, he just traveled to play against Oklahoma. What are we going to see from him a week later when he has to go into Kyle Field, a team that this season is going to want revenge? They're going to want to play against a team that they should have probably beaten in regulation last year and lost in quadruple overtime. The Southwest Classic game against Arkansas. Arkansas, this game has been played in Arlington since 2014. Arkansas is due for one upset. Is this the upset game? Is this your first road test to where you feel like outside of the Notre Dame game, maybe we don't wake up? Maybe we don't have all the bells and whistles intact. Maybe there are some things that we're missing. And so we got to put an emphasis on us trending in this direction. And then, of course, you have the Texas game at the end of the year. I think the South Carolina game is going to have massive playoff implications. Ceiling for this team, I think it's 10-2. I think if they can change the identity of the culture, they could easily be in the college football playoff hunt. They have the pieces. If Marcel Reed can start hitting the singles and the doubles the way he hits the home run ball, this is going to be a very lethal offense. The floor for them is 8-4. And I know that sounds crazy, but no, it is. To me, they have the lowest floor in all of college football. I mean, the highest floor in all of college football, because I know what to expect from them. They're a predictable offense. Predictable does not mean stoppable. It just means that I know what you are with an identity. I don't think this is the year for Texas A&M. But I will say, leaving this season, I think the way that we're talking about Texas A&M going into this season is the way we should be talking about them going to the end of the season. A lot to like out in College Station long term. Yeah, I look at their schedule and I think about, could they get tripped up against Arkansas, Auburn, some of these games? Absolutely. Man, even that Missouri game, I know they got to go on the road, and that's in November. And what do they look like coming off of some really tough games against Florida and LSU behind that or after that? But yeah, there's 6 games they should win just by stepping on the field, right? And then then you look at your tough to coin flip games. If you can go 4-2 in those, if you can go 3-3 in those, then you're talked about. Up until the last week, the last game of the year against Texas will be essentially play-in game at that point, right? If you've got 2 losses going into it. If you don't, then you're in a lot of trouble. So, all right, let's go over the Big Ten. Let's finish up with Washington, and then we've got about a 2-minute wild card, and we'll get out of here.
I'll make this quick. I think Washington will be the most fun team to watch in the Big Ten in 2025. Does that mean they're going undefeated? No. I'm telling you now, this team will be fun. Pac-12 After Dark might have died, but it lives in the Washington Huskies in 2025. Jed Fish, historically known for slowly building back his programs and having good second and third years. So I am very curious to see what Jed Fish does. Okay, the schedule. First 3 games of the year, they should win. Then you host Ohio State. Okay, that's a bugaboo. You will be going to Michigan, as we just got done talking about. That's on October 18th. You host Illinois. You also host Oregon at the end of the year. You are playing 4 of the 5 best teams in the Big Ten this year. There's that possibility this team could get Illinois at home. They could get Oregon in an upset at the end of the season. I think they do have that ceiling, but I think it's conservative, safe, and reasonable to say Washington should finish this year also at 8-4. I could see them getting as high as 9-3, and if they blow the doors off of something, 10-2. That feels like absolute best to me at this point. I think what Jed Fish can do with Damon Williams is going to be reminiscent of what he was able to do at Arizona with Noah Fifita. And if anything, I think Damon Williams has more physical gifts than what Fifita has. Offensively, again, I like what Denzel Boston brings. Selfishly, as a Penn State guy, Omari Evans, the transfer from the Nittany Lions, is the type of guy that can take the top off of a defense. So I think that's going to be a nice piece. Their tight ends are consistent on a regular basis. They are contributors. Jonah Coleman is a thumper at tailback. I love what his game is. So to pair a hammer like Coleman and a guy like Damon Williams, who is slippery, fast, and very smart with the football, I like what he can do. The brothers Hatchet on the interior. Packy Finau is a great offensive guard. Carver Willis and Drew as a party at tackle. Willis and the elder Hatchet transfers in. Speaking of transfers, that's the bulk of this defense this year, and that can be a problem. However, 2 of which that you're going to be focusing on are Arizona transfers. Yeah. So there's going to be that familiarity with Jed Fish and Tai Uiagalelei and Takario Davis in the secondary. CJ Christian from FIU, Zari Alexander from UCF, and then Tariq Al-Okta, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, is from Washington State. The defensive line, I love what Isaiah Ward is able to do. Prysock at cornerback, I think, is a really bright future. And this was a team that struggled to stop people last year. I think, again, it just matters. It just matters how quickly they're able to gel going into the season. Change the defensive coordinator, so that'll have some play into this season. But again, I think this is a team that they're probably going to have to outscore most of their opponents if they're going to want to win games. But when they do it, it's going to be flashy. It's going to be fun to watch. Look out for Damon Williams this year. I don't necessarily think he winds up in the Heisman race or anything like that, but he eventually will be in a year or 2. This is a guy who's got that much talent. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Washington. Their schedule's tough. All those games I mentioned, a lot of them you get at home, which is great, but it's still a murderer's row.
All right, Tom, I need you to do me a favor. Talk me off of the ledge, because I, again, have made it clear. I think Washington's going to be that last team fighting for a spot in the college football playoff.
Listen, I'm not, like I just said, I think 10 wins is not out of the realm of possibility, right? Like Oregon, I think we feel pretty strongly about Oregon this year, but Washington hosting Oregon in the last game of the year, that feels like a situation where the Huskies could get the Ducks, right? Other than that, looking at the rest of the schedule, they host Colorado State, they host UC Davis, they'll be at Washington State for the Apple Cup, then it's hosting Ohio State. Then you're at Maryland, you're hosting Rutgers, you're at Michigan, you're hosting Illinois, you're at Wisconsin, hosting Purdue, at UCLA, and then hosting Oregon. Like, the games are there. They can get Illinois at home. The 2 that really would scare me if I'm a Washington fan would be Ohio State and Oregon. And the rest of those games, especially at Michigan, given all the things we just pointed out about Michigan and their question marks, who's to say Damon Williams and company couldn't march into the big house and take out Michigan? I think that's very likely. The Illinois game is a big question mark. To me, if I'm in your situation, Cole, where it's like, I think Washington can make the playoff, I think them and Illinois, virtually similar resumes and very different teams in general, but 2 teams that are going to be right there on that proverbial bubble for the Big Ten.
Let's wild card it up just real quick, and let's just pick this weekend's games. Week 0, we'll go quick on this. We'll do them against the spread. Iowa State, Kansas State. Kansas State's a 3-point favorite. I'll take Kansas State -3.
-3 Kansas State. I think that they just have the more complete roster right now, and I think that the wide receiver room is going to be enough to get them by.
I think Avery Johnson has a little bit of a coming out party. Not that he didn't have talent last year, but considering they'll have most of America and Ireland's attention this coming weekend. Avery Johnson with a little breakout.
I am excited for this one too. Again, not the sexiest matchup, but it is something to watch. We get to see Dan Mullen as a 25.5-point favorite against Idaho State. I'm not going to pretend to know the first thing about Idaho State, but give me Mullen on the points.
I'm going to take Idaho State in the points. This is actually a really good Idaho State team that's going in the right direction year 2 at their head coach, but I do think that UNLV wins.
Will we see an orgy in Vegas? That's the question mark. Wait, we will see Alex Orgy with Vegas. I am very excited to see what he does, because it's a second lease on life, and Dan Mullen does like dual threat quarterback. So we'll see.
Yeah, you're going to see 2 orgies happen that weekend in Vegas.
All right, before we get in trouble, Kansas is a 13-point favorite against FSU, Fresno State. I'll buy Jalen Daniels. I guess I've taken all 3 favorites here. That's a terrible advice, but give me Jalen Daniels for the upset. This isn't the Fresno State of old.
I like Matt Entz. He was the replacement for Chris Klieman at North Dakota State. Went to be the linebackers coach at USC last season. I think that they can have some success out there. It just won't be in week 1. I'm going to take the minus 13 with Kansas.
Yeah, Leipold, Daniels at home, a trip for Fresno State. Don't love that for the Bulldogs.
Also, first game in new stadium as well. So that's at the time.
Be rocking. Western Kentucky's a 10-point favorite against Sam Houston. I'll go Sam Houston here just because I don't want to pick a 4th favorite in a row.
I am not going
Western Kentucky to win. Sam Houston to cover. Sorry.
I'm not going to sleep on the couch, so I am taking Sam Houston to get the win over Western Kentucky. 2 new quarterbacks being broken in. Phil Lungo, welcome back to Huntsville.
I like the Bearcats with a K covering.
And then last one, ACC powerhouse Stanford up against Hawaii. 7:30, even though this is out there on the island. Hawaii's a 2.5-point favorite. Give me Stanford with the upset.
I'm going to follow in the same pathway. Stanford, Frank Reich, Andrew Luck. Please remember yourselves that you want to bring in the right coach after this season. But you begin the year, get a win over Timmy Change Rainbow Warriors on the road. Give me Stanford plus 2.5.
The Stanford's going to be such an interesting story while Andrew Luck is there. I think there's more pressure on this opening game than I think is going to get a lot of coverage. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's the beginning of the Andrew Luck era in a lot of ways for at least people nationally to be paying attention to, and starting off on the right foot against an opponent that you should have more talent than. Granted, it's a trip, but this is a big one for Stanford. They need to take a step forward, and it starts here.
Yeah, I'm not very high on Stanford in general. They might be a 3-9 team, but I don't know. Give me the Cardinal this weekend. Mm-hmm. All right, next week we are live on Monday. We'll talk about some of these week 0 games. We'll preview a bunch of week 1 games, and then we'll be live on Wednesday again. So we'll be live Monday and Wednesday at noon. Come hang out with us. Make sure you hit the subscribe button over on YouTube. It's the Power 2 on College Football Addiction. Boys, thanks for hanging out. We finally made it.